His word, he says, and I quote, problem is what? Is inevitable. However, we must be the solution, the inevitable solution to the inevitable problem.
Diego Twahirwa, you can even call him Chiri Man, the man who is doing chiri, who is exporting chiri. Looking at CFTA, how can value chain of chiri accommodate more youth? When we had a bilateral discussion, your problem is supply. The market you have, but the problem is supply. These people that are here, young entrepreneurs, how can we involve them to help you in supply chain?
The big question or the issue that we have is getting the sustainable and reliable market. And we are lucky to have a big demand and sustainable market for them. So with the CFTA, that means like we are open. It's not only, I'm not going only to consider Rwanda as a source of the production or supply. It's open for everyone. Like I was lucky to get a big demand to supply chili to China. And when I signed the contract, everyone said like, how are you going to be able to meet this commitment you're signing? But for me, because I was exposed enough and I know how the order for India or China, it was nothing. And the way they consider Africa as one country, is that I was looking in that framework where I said now, this order is not only for me, it's not only for Rwanda, it's for Africa. And now with this CFTA program, it's going to ease the transaction and also even the move of people, like for the skills sharing. And for me, I had started this on my own, where I was expanding to DRC, to Zimbabwe. Now, with this framework, it's going to accommodate more young youth across Africa.
We need to upload our products there. I need to sit in Ghana and upload this there. And somebody needs to sit in Gabon and be able to buy from us, okay? So your assignment, number one, to talk to Jumia and find out why can't African companies post there. Number two, we've mentioned that everybody is doing business on Instagram, on Facebook. Instagram has something called Instagram Shop, where anybody can sell on, but it's not available in Africa. Why? Why can't African businesses use Instagram Shop? So you guys here, write to Instagram and make sure that by the time we are coming for the next summit, all businesses are able to upload on Instagram Shop, and we are able to make payments through Instagram Shop and buy through Instagram Shop. Number three, do you know Elsa Majimbo? Yes, she was making funny videos on Instagram. Now she's modeling for all the big brands, okay? There is a model in the village who does not have access to internet, and we've talked about it right now, who if they had that access to internet, first of all, they could have skills. We are talking about skills here, skills here, skills here. All you need to do is go on YouTube, and after is not going to wait for us. It's just a document. It's just a document. So we have to make it come alive. And so you have 4 assignments. After is not going to wait for us. It's just a document. It's just a document. So we have to make it come alive. And so you have 4 assignments. Please go and represent us.
We stand at a better position to benefit, to support the benefits and the opportunities of the FCFTA that we are talking about. So now we want to reiterate what the minister from Rwanda mentioned, that it is true. His Excellency Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the FCFTA, his priority is to ensure that the young people are driving this FCFTA. So we are putting quite a number of strategies at the FCFTA to ensure that the youth are involved not only in the negotiations, but as well as in the implementation.
As I mentioned, CFTA is a game changer, but to be a game changer, they need to streamline the trade information. That's very critical. And I know in their pillar it has there, but it needs to trickle down to SMEs. The information needs to trickle down to the youth, to the women.
Africa, Africa. Okay, I'm just going to start with a quick request that we make sure that our mics are muted. I'll request my colleague to mute. I think a couple of mics are on and it's causing a bit of disruption. So let's just start off on that note. But that aside, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching from, and welcome to the very first episode of Africa Unplugged. We are very, very excited to have you join us. So many of you joined right on time, and that's a really good thing. It lets us know that you are looking forward to doing some learning, and we will be learning with you as well. I see our special guest is also here, so I think we are right on track. Please go ahead and let us know your name, where you're watching from or listening in from in the comment section, just so we can connect with you and know how many people we are reaching out there. So welcome once again. My name is Fiona Kemijisha. I will be your moderator this evening. It is my pleasure to be hosting this conversation, this discussion on the AGDEG. And let me just again request you to make sure that your mics are off. There's a tiny bit of disruption that I'm hearing on my end. So let's just double check and make sure we have that on lock, and then we can move forward. All right, so I know a lot of you have been long-time members of the ULEAD Unplugged community for the past two or so years, and you're here for the very first episode of Africa Unplugged, which is an upscaled version. And just in case you're not updated, maybe you don't follow us on social media, maybe you're not, on the pulse of what's happening with us, you may not know how this came to be. So just a quick summary so that you have a direction is ULEAD Africa submitted a pitch for the African Union Civic Tech Fund, which is a Pan-African competition that aims to support innovative civic tech initiatives that have potential to sustain meaningful participation by African citizens, especially youth, in addressing and solving governance and development challenges across the continent. So this that we are attending today, this Africa Unplugged series, is our winning pitch. We're very proud of it. It's a space to amplify youth voices in the continental governance agenda and provide a safe space for discourse between African youth and our leaders. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our very special guest this evening, Ambassador Salah Hamad, originally from Sudan. Ambassador Salah is currently the head of the Human Rights and Transitional Justice Unit within the Department of Political Affairs of the African Union Commission and the head of the African Governance Architecture Secretariat. I know we are online and we can't exactly clap, but maybe you can tap your little emoji for clapping so that we can give Ambassador Salah a very warm welcome. Ambassador Salah, welcome, karibu, as we say in East Africa. I'm going to invite you to just say hello to the audience. Welcome.
Asante sana, Fiona. I'm honored to be part of this engagement indeed. And thank you very much indeed for having me this evening. I'm quite honored and delighted. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. Maybe I don't think it's just me, but sometimes when someone important is also saying thank you, you wonder, wow, me? Are you thanking me? So thank you so much. We're so honored by your presence, that you made time to help us learn a couple of things. One of the things that we have continually seen in our work with young people is that there's a desire to be part of these important conversations or to know about important things that are happening in our regions and in our continent. But sometimes sometimes things seem a little technical. And then we withdraw, and that's on us as well. But we want this space to help us really understand continental governance. We want it not to be something we just sort of hear or read on Twitter or read on websites, and we are not very sure what that means. So I'd like us to start off on that note, perhaps, continental governance agenda. When we say that, Ambassador Salah, kindly help us understand a little bit about what that means. Why is it something that youth should be interested in, should be taking note of, and perhaps also what is the African Union's mandate in promoting the governance agenda?
Once again, Fiona, thank you very much for having me this evening. And through you, I wish to greet all of those who are with us this evening around the table. Those who are linked directly to this Zoom conversation, and those who are also participating through other social media platforms. Let me also begin by thanking ULEAD Africa for this initiative. This is an excellent platform that is quite timely and needed for the engagement of youth in the governance affairs of the African continent. And why is that? Simply because, as I always say, and I always repeat once and again, that the African youth are the leaders of today and the leaders of tomorrow. And because of that, they must be engaged in the governance affairs at all levels, national, regional, and continental. Africa today, of the 1.2 billion person or individuals or people, 65% of them, if not more, are below the age of 35. So the African youth are the majority, and because of that, they must be part of the governance affairs of the African continent. With this introduction, I wish to dive immediately to answer your question and say that the African Union, as the continental organization, has been transformed, as we all know, from the Organization of African States, which was mandated to liberate the continent from the colonial powers at that time, and moved to the African Union, which is mandated to build the Africa that is united, peaceful, and prosperous. So to unite the continent that is peaceful and prosperous, we need to begin by making sure that the governance system in each and every member states is a good one, and I will come to that later, and also that we are embracing an African democracy that is allow the African citizens to be part of the governance affairs of the continent, as well as the governance affairs at the national level. And when we say good governance, we mean that our leaders collectively with the African people are engaged in a process, transparent, a process that inclusive, to make sure that we are all, as African people, are part of the movement to advance democracy, which allow us to develop the continent that we all love, the continent that we all live in, so we can make Africa a better place, so we can make Africa or build Africa that is united, prosperous, and peaceful. And that is why the African Union is very keen on engaging the African youth and empowering the African women through this process to make sure that the African youth and the African women are part of this movement to develop the continent that we love through the promotion of good governance, democracy, and rule of law at all levels, as I mentioned earlier. So this is basically the simple answer that I can answer for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. And again, I want us to never take it for granted that some of these phrases are familiar to everyone. Sometimes we hear them and we don't exactly know what does that mean and why is it something that I should care about. And I think now we have a better understanding of why, what we mean when we say continental governance agenda and why that's something so fundamental for our countries, our regions, and ultimately the continent. So now we're going to dive into the ACDEG, the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. And just in case you have never heard of it, I think that you're in a very great place to be able to learn about it. It's the most prominent instrument that defines the continental governance agenda of our continent, what Ambassador Salah has just been talking about. And perhaps we can start with just an explanation of what is the ACDEG, what is this instrument, and what exactly does it do?
Thank you so much once again, Fiona. The ACDEG, the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance, widely known as ACDEG, is a very important instrument and treaty of the African shared values instruments. Let me quickly explain what we mean by African shared values, and then I will continue giving more information about the ACDEG. In 2011, our heads of state and governments met in Kigali, Rwanda, and the purpose of the summit was to identify or agree or define what are the African shared values. After a very long debate, our heads of state and government decided to define the African shared values as all the provisions of all the treaties and instruments that have been adopted by the heads of state and government at the continental level. So each and every treaty that we have adopted has a number of articles and provisions. They all constitute our African shared values. This, of course, in addition to a good set of traditions and cultures that we all accepted as Africans to be part of our African shared values. One of the most important instruments and treaties of the African shared values is the AGDEC. The AGDEC is an African Union instrument that set out continental standards aimed at consolidating democracy and improving governance in Africa. It was adopted by our heads of state and government in 2007, exactly 30th of January 2007, and entered into force after receiving 15 ratification on 15th February 2012. This charter, AGDEC, is inspired by the objectives and principles enshrined in our 2000 Constitutive Act of the African Union, particularly Article 3, G and H, and Article 4, M. Both of them, in fact, speak about promoting good governance, democracy, and rule of law, as well as the promotion and protection of human and people's rights on the continent. AGDEC set out key principles agreed among AU member states as part of the African shared values in response to various democratic governance challenges that are affecting peace, security, stability, and development on the continent. These principles are, and I will be very quick because there are really too many. One is respect for human and people's rights as well as democratic principles. Access and exercise the power that is part of the states at the national level in accordance with the constitutions of our member states. Also promote of a systemic governance system that is promoting democracy and good governance at the national level based on equal representation. Holding of regular, transparent, free and fair elections. Separation of power between the executive, the parliament, as well as the judicial. Promotion of gender equality, and this is very important, in public and private institutions. Effective participation of citizens in the democratic and developmental processes, including youth and women. Transparency and fairness in the management of public affairs and national resources, and also this is very important for us as Africans. As well as, of course, consideration and rejection of any act that leads to unconstitutional changes of government, which is a phenomenon that we are currently facing in some African member states. Last but not least, the AGDEC really calls for the empowerment of African citizen participation and recognize the role and rights of all African citizens without any discrimination or exclusion in the political as well as the governance affairs of our member states at the national level. So these are the principles that the AGDEC is really calling for. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Ambassador Salah. I have no doubt that we are actually getting, even in these few minutes that we've just done, I feel like we are definitely getting a better understanding. And I encourage our audience as well to go ahead and leave some questions or some comments in the comments section, and we'll be able to address those a little further along in the program. And Ambassador Salah, you talked about African shared values, which is a great segue into something that I also wanted to talk about, which is the accountability framework. So just from my own reading and a little bit of research, I know that that's a fundamental part of the AGDEG itself, the accountability framework. And I'm sure a lot of young people that are tuned in and are watching are thinking about that, what does this, we have this great instrument, that is embracing all of these shared values. How does the accountability come in? How are the different member states perhaps kept to this word, that we have signed this and this is what we are going to practice. So maybe share with us a little bit about what the accountability framework looks like as we get to understand this instrument a little bit more.
Thank you once again, Fiona. Before I answer the question, allow me to just share some information about the current state of affairs on the ratification of the AGDEG. We all know that there's a process that takes place for within each and every member state to ratify a treaty that is introduced by the African Union. Maybe some of us around the table might need to know, how do we come up with these treaties, how these treaties are developed, and why they are developed, to address what. Currently, at the continental level, we have close to 63 treaties and instruments, and a number of policies and pronouncements that bring the total to close to maybe 72 or so. But let me focus on the AGDEG. Usually, each and every treaty is introduced by specific needs that are faced by member states. And then the issue is debated at the level of the Assembly, the heads of state and government, where an agreement will be reached, and then the African Union Commission will be commissioned to develop that particular treaty to address that particular issue that is faced by our member states and government. After Africa was liberated, 20 years later, the need for promoting an African concept of democracy and good governance emerged. And that is why in the early 2000s, after the transformation of the African Union from the Organization of African Unity, our heads of state and government wanted the African Union as the continental organization to focus more on providing the technical support to our member states to assist them with that transformation into into promoting good governance and democracy and democratic values at the national level. That is why the demands and need came or emerged for having an African instrument, an African-owned, an African-developed instrument that will lead the efforts that are aiming at promoting good governance, democracy, and rule of law at the continental level. So then our member states met through experts in the field from all 55 member states, met and debated for 2 years this instrument until finally they agreed in 2006 on a set of principles and a set of articles that are constituting or that are basically the composition of this very important treaty. Then the treaty was adopted by our heads of state and government in 2007. After the adoption, the treaty will be open for signatures by member states. They have to sign. That is the first step. So adoption in itself does not bring any obligations really on the shoulders of our member states. After the adoption, the charter will be open for signature. We currently have 42 signatures from a total of 55 member states. Then after that, each and every member state has a different system at the national level, a ratification system. Some ratifications are done through debate in the parliament. Some ratifications are done through debate in the executive level, that is the ministerial level. Some, no debate, no question asked, only signature by the president, the head of the state. So each and every state has its own system. Once an agreement has been reached to ratify the treaty by member states, then the ratification instrument will be deposited at the African Union Commission here in Addis Ababa. That day will be the day of ratification. For each and every instrument to enter into force, we need 15 ratifications. And then after that, of course, any new ratification will be an added value to make sure that we are getting toward having a universal ratification of the treaty. Sorry, currently we don't have so many treaties, African treaties, that are fully ratified, but at least one of them is the African Charter, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which is the charter that is mandating the Banjul Commission to promote and protect human and people's rights on the continent. That charter is fully universally ratified by all 55 member states. This AGDEC currently has only 37 ratification. That means we still have about 18 more member states to ratify this charter so we can reach the level of ratification. So what obligations this charter brings to our member states? The obligations that the charter brings to our member states, particularly the member states that have ratified the charter, is one, that member states will domesticate and implement the charter at the national level. Domestication means that the provisions of the charter will be incorporated into the national law. So if there is any law that is contradict the charter or the provisions of the charter provisions will prevail over the national laws that are not really in harmony with the AGDEC. In addition to that, there will be a commitment, of course, to promote democracy and rule of law, as well as to promote and protect human and people's rights. There is also be commitment to promote the culture of democracy and peace. There will also be commitment from our member states to commit themselves to having democratic elections processes at the national level. And of course, there will be more responsibilities and more programs and activities by the member states to promote political and economic and social governance system. More obligations, of course, is to also support the separation of power, to ensure wider dissemination of the charter, so then each and every individual should be aware of the existence of the provisions of the charter, and last but not least, to submit a report every 2 years to the African Governance Platform on the efforts by the member states on the promotion and the implementation of this charter at the national level. So these are the set of obligations that I could mention at this moment. Thank you very much, Fiona.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. You actually covered quite a couple of things that indeed I was going to come to. So I think it's great that you already have an understanding of what are the objectives of the AGDEG, and also also the process of ratification, because I do think that's another one of those things that often we interact with, but we are not exactly sure how does that work. So I think that we're definitely living with a good understanding. We really want to take the veil off of this instrument so that we can really appreciate it and understand what it means for our countries and our region, and how we can actively be supporters of the work that it's trying to achieve. So going back to the issue of accountability frameworks, I know that's somewhere that the African governance architecture actively comes in when we talk about the reporting framework and the role of the AGA. Kindly give us and our audience some information on what that looks like, what exactly it is that the AGA does, and what the role is there as we work on this aspect of accountability, because it is such a fundamental thing when we talk about any instrument, or when we talk about actually governance as a whole. So kindly share with us a little bit about that accountability mechanism and how it works.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Yes, as you mentioned, when we look into the implementation of the AGDEC at the national level, there are a number of aspects that need to be identified and looked into. and one of them is accountability. But before I come to speak about accountability, transparency, and information sharing, I want to quickly, with your permission, give more information about what is the AGA is all about, the African governance architecture. So at least we can then, all of us, have that knowledge and move ahead with it to further explore more information about the AGTEC. The AGA, the African governance architecture, was declared by our heads of state and government in Kigali in 2011, when the African shared values were identified and agreed on. The purpose of the AGA, the AGA, is basically to consolidate the principles of the promotion of democracy and good governance, and promote them through the African Governance Platform, which is basically composed of all African Union organs, institutions, as well as the regional economic communities. Why is that? Simply because it will then allow Africa to speak with one voice when it comes to the promotion of good governance, democracy, and rule of law. And also the other purpose, or the other objective of the process, is to assist the member states that are struggling to promote good governance, democracy, and rule of law at the national level by providing the technical support that is needed. So then, collectively as Africans, we can promote good governance, democracy, rule of law at the national level. And with that, we will ensure that collectively we are contributing to building the Africa that is integrated, prosperous, and peaceful, driven by its own citizens. That is why this AGA was created. And one of the major aspects that I always try to really remind our African citizens of is the need for each and every African citizen to be part of this process. You don't have to be called on. You don't have to wait to be called on to be part of it. Because once you are an African, you are the African Union. Once you are an African, you are part of the African movement to promote democracy, good governance, rule of law on the continent, so we can collectively build the Africa that we want and the Africa that we deserve. The Africa Governance Platform, which is composed of about 18 members, it is usually chaired by an organ of the African Union for 2 years and co-chaired by one of the RECs, one of the regional economic communities. Currently, the chair is the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in Banjul, and the vice chair is IGAD, based in Djibouti, one of the regional economic communities. This platform is the mechanism that receives reports of member states every 2 years. And then each and every member of the platform will look into the section that belongs to it. If it is human rights, then the Banjul Commission will look at the aspect of human rights. The rights of the child are looked at by the African Committee of Experts on the Right and Welfare of the Child. Corruption issues looked at by the Advisory Board on Corruption. And then all the regional economic communities also will have a say to say. After the report is examined, analyzed, a set of recommendations will be issued. And then there's a bigger role also for civil society to submit shadow reports. So shadow reports are submitted by civil society, and then both reports that is submitted by civil society and governments will be examined, and a set of recommendations will be issued. And of course, member states are obliged to implement these recommendations at the national level. Here, the issue of accountability comes, the issue of transparency comes, the issue of responsibility also comes, because there's collective processes that involves member states as well as the wider citizenry to make sure that we are collectively addressing the recommendations that comes out of the African Governance Platform. And here, of course, maybe a question could be asked: what is the value added of having civil society to be part of this process? I would say that civil society and media academia role in this process is extremely important because they play that role of verifying the information that is submitted by member states. And that is why the opinion through the reports submitted by civil society, media, and academia are extremely important and extremely welcomed. That way, we will ensure there's accountability, we'll ensure there's transparency, and also we will ensure that there's responsibility in implementing the recommendations at the national level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. You actually went over and above, which is really great because we were certainly, I was going to bring up something about the role of civil society when we talk about continental governance, and verification is such an important part of the conversation on accountability. So thank you for sharing that. I know that we have a number of civil society members here with us, our partners. And also I'd like to recognize Mr. John Bosco Kalisa, the Executive Director at the East African Business Council. Thank you for joining us. It's always a really great honor to have our leaders joining us. It's such a great example of servant leadership that you take the time to come and talk to young people to help us really get into these processes and be a part of what's happening on the continent in our communities as well. So I'd like us to perhaps talk, now that we're talking about the AGA, the African Governance Architecture. I know that because we have so many young people in our audience, they are curious, they'd like to know, what does youth engagement within the AU AGA look like? As we really open up this space for young people to talk directly to people who are influencers in these spaces of governance. And right now with you, Ambassador Salah, in the AU, kindly share with us a little bit of what that looks like, youth engagement within the AU AGA.
As I mentioned earlier, Fiona, that the African Union is very keen on engaging youth. The AGA and the AGA Secretariat, which I have the honor of heading it, from the beginning of it, from the beginning of building this or creating this Secretariat, we focused mainly on youth, the African youth. And that is why we developed what is known as YES, Y-E-S, that is the Youth Engagement Strategy. The Youth Engagement Strategy aims at engaging youth in the governance affairs at the national level, regional level, as well as the continental level. At the regional level, we've been working very closely with our member states to assist them to create youth associations, youth councils, and also to make sure that each and every political party at the national level has a youth wing. Not a youth wing that is chaired by a 65-year-old person. No, but a youth wing that is chaired by youth. And we managed, in fact, to work very closely with a number of member states to do so. Every year, we get our chairperson, the chairperson of the African Union, also to send communications to our member states to remind them, to the heads of member states, to remind them of their obligations, to make sure that youth quotas are preserved in the parliament, that youth are employed as ministers, that youth are employed in the executive as well as the judicial system, police, military, as higher posts that they can get, and also to make sure that youth are represented in the policy making processes at the national level. And we see really progress made in many African countries. I'm not going to name any, but it is very promising, and I think it's one of the initiatives that could be led by you lead to support us as AGA APSA Secretariat with, is to help us to build a database on how member states are responsive to this call that we place every year. How many political parties at the national level have embarked on having youth wings at the national level? How many ministers we have? How many members of parliaments we have? It will be a great help for us because we keep trying to seek member states to support us with building this database, but not all of our member states are responsive. So really this is a call out there through you, Fiona, to you lead Africa to assist us with building this database that we really need. so we can have the information handily, and then we could face our member states with it. Then we will be able to applaud those who are doing well and try to encourage those who are not doing well to do better. The other aspects of the yes is to also make sure that our youth are engaged in the electoral processes. That is why we are going around the continent. Recently we were in the Gambia, we were in Zimbabwe, and in a few months we are going to South Sudan and other countries to train our youth, to train them to become trainers on how youth could vote, how youth could become candidates, how youth could really be agents of change instead of being agents of destruction during and post-elections. And we really count, as we speak today, we are counting heavily on the youth in Kenya to prove to the world that it is possible for the African youth to become the agents of change that we hope for. Simply because anything goes wrong in Kenya or elsewhere, it will be the youth that will be employed to carry the guns. It will be the youth that will be manipulated and misused to become the agents of destruction instead of becoming the agents of success and the agents of peace and the agents of change. And that is all what we are really trying to do, is to tell the African youth that Africa is your home. Africa is your future. Africa is a good place for you if you want to live in. And Africa could be where you could build your future, where you could have a family, where you could live in peace. And interestingly, we have also managed to support some other movements. Let me just mention one for those who are with us here from West Africa, or those from East Africa who are not really informed of this initiative that we led in West Africa, particularly in Nigeria. A campaign that was widely known as Not Too Young to Run. The campaign was in fact aiming at changing the electoral code in Nigeria. Because in Nigeria, prior to this campaign, you need to be 35 to run for an office. You need to be 24 to vote. You need to be 55 to run for presidency. This campaign took us a bit long, but after all, the campaign achieved its goal of changing the electoral code at the national level in Nigeria. As a result, as the age of 18, you can run for an office, you can vote, you can be part of the voting process, you can be a candidate, you could even run for presidency if you wish. And as a result, the voter registration in Nigeria from 18 million increased to 86 million. So now 86 million in Nigeria are eligible to vote. This is a victory for the Nigerian youth, and soon we are moving this campaign to other African countries. So then it will be a victory for all African youth wherever they are. Our African youth are at the heart of this policy that we are promoting, and this is strategy that we are really trying to implement, the youth engagement strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. And I'm glad that you also brought in the aspect of elections. And in East Africa right now, the Kenyan election is what we are really focusing on. And as you lead Africa and our consortium, we're also running a campaign specifically on this that we've dubbed Kenya ya Amani. We'd be glad if you would all be a part of that. I think that it's something that ultimately doesn't just affect one country, it affects the entire continent. And it was also great to hear about the Not Too Young to Run campaign. There's a similar, I would say, initiative called Run for Office in Kenya that we've been working very closely with, and we've interviewed so many young people who are, leaders of value, and they really they have some very honest and sincere, hopes for what they want to do. But more importantly, they're very committed to the aspect of peaceful elections, fair elections, transparent processes. So I think that that's something it's so relevant right now in light of the Kenyan elections in East Africa. And I hope that all of us here can also just be part of that campaign. It's something that we've been driving for the past couple of months, and we've gotten some great feedback, and we want it to be a message that we pass on to every single person. Kenya ya Amani, and just in case you're not from East Africa, that loosely translates to a peaceful Kenya. But I see that we have a few hands up, and I will get to each of you in time. However, I know that Mr. John Bosco Kalisa's hand was up, and perhaps I could give him a moment to share what he would like to say. Mr. Kalisa, please go ahead. Okay, I think we may have lost him. Perhaps we will get him back. All right, unfortunately, I think we may have lost him, but do keep your hands up. We will get to you. I do see a few hands up, and that's great. I also don't want you to think we are not seeing you in the comment section. Thank you so much for letting us know where you're watching from. I see Kenya, I see Nigeria, Gambia, DRC, Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe, Guinea, Cameroon, Botswana, and gosh, so many places. I probably won't even mention everybody, but Tanzania, Malawi, we are so glad. Uganda, Mozambique. It's fantastic to see a conversation really not, being limited to one place or the other, but really being about the entire continent, because it is the AU after all. It's not a conversation that is limited to one place or the other. So thank you once again for taking the time to come and learn with us, to come and take advantage of this opportunity also to interact with Ambassador Sala and really get to know what this AGA is about, to get to know about the AU AGA. So I think perhaps before we go straight into the next question, let me give one of our audience members an opportunity to ask a question. I will request that your question or comment be limited to a time frame of 30 seconds, because we are working with a very specific time frame. We like to keep it as short as possible. Also, Ambassador Salah has given us, a specific amount of time, so we'd like to respect that. So I'll go ahead and start with the first hand I see here. Walter Kasempa, please go ahead. Please note I will be timing. Thank you. Go ahead, Walter.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to give my comment. Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah, for your well-elaborated explanations on the role of AGA and AGDEC. So my question really is, how possible is it to put a framework where AGA and the Africa Youth Charter can be sort of parallel and intertwined? The reason I say this is because Article 11 of the Africa Youth Charter talks about youth participation in the governance and political processes of member states, probably when they ratify. But when you look at AGA, it doesn't have specific articles in all its 56 articles that speak to how young people can be part and parcel of the governance processes on implementation and inclusion and participation level. So is it possible for the amendment of AGA to sort of be in line with some of the policies that are in the Africa Youth Charter, so that governments that are able to ratify it should have a specific, framework in which they include young people in the governance process?
Thank you so much, Walter. All right, thank you once again. Let me go to Ambassador Sala now. Perhaps he'll go to that question first. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go to that question first. So Ambassador Sala, please.
Thank you very much indeed for the question. And my answer is simple. When we speak about the AGDEC, when we speak about the AGA, we are not just speaking about the AGDEC, in fact. The AGDEC is one instrument that we count heavily on. But the AGA is to promote the entire set of African shared values. That means all the instruments and treaties that the African Union is advocating for their ratification to promote good governance, democracy, and rule of law on the continent. So in the AGA, within the AGA framework, when we are promoting youth participation, we refer to articles that are part of the AGDEC, but also we are supported by the provisions of the Youth Charter, because the Youth Charter is also one of the instruments of the African shared values that we are promoting, and we are also advocating for its universal ratification. But here, allow me to take this, Fiona, if you don't mind, to take this, or to seize this moment to really advocate for the following. One, there is really need for youth, for African youth, to be involved in the ratification, the lobby and advocacy, sorry, of ratifying all AU instruments, and in particular the Youth Charter. The Youth Charter, unfortunately, has not yet received the universal ratification that we were hoping for when the Youth Charter was introduced. We need to do more. And as youth organizations, youth-led organizations, I call on you to be part of this campaign to promote the African Charter, the African Youth Charter at the national level. Secondly, it is very important that we also try to assist our member states to support youth-led organizations, and also to support the youth-led organizations to create programs that are fit for youth, created by youth. We don't have to always, see programs that are designed by government officials that are like me, no longer youth, but youth at heart. But we need to see youth at the lead, the driving seat, creating programs for youth participation in the governance affairs, including elections and others. Simply because as youth, you know what other youth really need and what other youth desire, and what other programs and activities that could be fit for youth implementation at the national level. Here also the AGA Secretariat stands ready to support any organization, youth-led organization, with the implementation of any program or activity at the national level that is promoting youth participation and youth engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. I believe you really touched the different areas of that specific question. So I believe it was really well answered. Let's go ahead, because I do want to make sure that you as the audience have a chance to speak to Ambassador Salah, because this space in a very big way is created so that you can have such moments to be able to ask these questions directly, comment, and really interact with people that are of influence in governance spaces. So let me go ahead to Israel. Israel, please go ahead and ask your question.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Ambassador Israel Arogonlo from Nigeria. I'm the Communication Officer of Global Peace Let's Talk Youth Chapter, and it's an honor to be here on the space. I also want to appreciate Ambassador Salah for this wonderful session and for his wealth of experience in terms of youth engagement, especially in emancipation of political, activities across the member states. And mine is not really a question, but just I want to make an inquiry to know in terms of cooperation and partnership, what is in for the organization, because we are also ready for partnership. We've been on in terms of advocating for peace in the African continent, and we are always ready to work with any organization that are youth focused, especially in terms of engaging the young people, taking global action, and also we are working them politically. And I want to know if there's room for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Israel. So the question, I think if I've understood correctly, is really about the opportunities for collaboration in specifically the area of championing for peace. So let me direct that to Ambassador Salah.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Ambassador Israel, for your intervention. Well, since it was a comment, not really a question, let me just say that the African Union I think there is an intervention.
Okay, sorry about that. I think we've cleared it up. Please go ahead.
I hope it is not an attempt coup d'etat against me.
I don't believe so.
Well, let me say that the African Union, as I mentioned before, uh, is you and me. Once you are an African, you are the African Union. And the African Union has a number of programs and activities that are designed for youth. I wish we would have extended the invitation to our youth division. Maybe next time our youth division could come over to explain to you in details the number of programs and activities and initiatives that we have at the continental level as well as the national level to support youth participation in various sectors: economic, social, cultural, as well as political sectors. But we stand ready as AGA APSA Secretariat to support technically, because of course the African Union is not a funding agency, but we can help you to design programs and activities. We can train you in a way or another to build your capacity. We can also allow you to, or not allow you, in fact, allow you is not the word to use, but we can facilitate your participation in some of the activities of the African Union. Some of the training programs that are taking place here and there in various programs, human rights programs, transitional justice programs, leadership programs, electoral cycle programs, electoral processes. At the end, I will be able. I hope I will be allowed to share my email, so then we'll remain ready to answer or to respond to any inquiry individually. So then we will see how we can really support you, your organization at the national level. Just one message to end this intervention with, that the African Union is not a funding organization. You might not, of course, get that financial support you need, but really there are so many other initiatives and programs that could also help you to build your capacity in a way or another. We have internship programs. We have the African Youth Corps program. We have the Pan-African University that offers a number of programs based on full scholarships. So again, there are so many programs that are available. So get in touch, and if the programs are not under my umbrella or my secretariat, then I will direct you to the entity or to the division or directorate where you can get information from. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. I'm sure a couple of people have noted that you'd like to share your email. Please feel free actually to share it even now as we get our next question, so we don't forget and people don't come for us. They don't come for us here. So let me go ahead to the next question. I'm going to remind you to be mindful of time. So next we have Bala Saido. Please go ahead, Bala.
All right, thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you, Ambassador Salah Muhammad. I'm so happy to be here today, and honestly, I'm quite impressed with some few questions have actually noted has been answered while answering some questions. But there are other things I think, okay, maybe probably I'll be taking Fiona on some things we're doing here in Nigeria. And I appreciate also what we're doing actually is
Okay, we seem to have lost you, Bala.
It actually what Ambassador has. Hello, can you hear me, please?
Okay, we can hear you. We had lost you for just a moment, but please be brief. I'm just going to request you to ask the question or make the comment in just a short time.
Okay. My question is, okay, thank God Ambassador will be sharing his email with us because we're doing something, a very powerful programs for youths and created by youth and to be led by youth here in Nigeria. We have a National Youth Democratic Assembly, which I'm the coordinator, and we're doing something great. So we really want to to follow up with Ambassador to actually see how we can actually partner. And also, secondly, I want to know from the Ambassador if they have some kind of the youth chartered vision, so that anytime we are developing our programs and try to align our programs with the SDGs goals, we can also align them likewise with the goals of the youth charter and probably the goals of the AGA. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, thank you so much, Bala. So I believe that the second part was the question. So let me just direct it straight to Ambassador Salah.
Thank you, Fiona. I have shared my email on the chat board. Please feel free to get in touch. I will certainly link our brother Bala Sedu with our youth division, where there are a number of programs and activities aimed at the implementation of the African Youth Charter, where you could also try to get more information on how you can coordinate and collaborate with our youth division. But also, once you send an email, we'll try to see how the AGA Secretariat could also be of support to you and your organization at the national level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Let me go straight to the next hand, David Tuitoek. Please go ahead. Okay, David is not ready, so I'm going to go to David Chisale. Please go ahead, David.
Thank you very much, moderator. And it is really a great honor, Ambassador Sarah, to hear so much in-depth information that's so insightful. My question is, from the inclusion of the AGA, what are the modalities being set forth to include independent activists and advocates? This is from a point where I'm not trying to attack my country, Malawi, bear with me, but we are so sick and tired of the chains whereby our politicians have got a system where they involved youth that are related to them, not those that are on the grassroots. And
Davey, you seem to be muted. Davey, you are muted.
To include independent. Thank you. I hope you.
Okay, I think Ambassador Salah got the gist. All right, thank you, Davey. Let me over.
David, let me be honest with you and say that when the AGA was declared and established, as civil society, not civil society, as a citizenry engagement mechanism, many member states really were wondering why our heads of state and governments declared or established this AGA. But let me be very honest with you. The AGA is to make sure that each and every citizen, each and every African is part of this movement or these programs and activities that we are leading to promote democracy, good governance, and rule of law at the national level. So, if we look at Malawi, belongs to all Malawians. All Malawians should have a stake in running the show at the political, at the national level, the political processes. Whether you are a defender, human rights defender, governance, political activist, you are an African, you must have a platform to express your views. Expressing your views not necessarily meaning that you are attacking your country, not necessarily that you are against your government. We believe that as Africans, we should avail the platform for all of us as Africans to express our views, aiming at building our countries and also building the continent. Once we build our countries at the national level, that will contribute necessarily to building the Africa we want and the Africa we want. What we are trying to do is to avail that platform for participation of youth, participation of human rights defenders, human rights organizations, political activists. Everyone should have a space to express his or her views. We stand supportive of all Africans to do so. We as Africans disagree to agree and agree to disagree. But after all, our unity is in our diversity. No one today can come to claim that he or she is in love with this continent more than others. We all share the same love. We all share the same commitment. We all share the same dedication. And that is why we are all responsible for building this Africa, this continent, starting from our countries at the national level. We believe that what you have against the politicians you named is not personal. It is based on principles, guided by your own constitutions. And that is why we're here to support you, because you are guided by your constitutions. You are guided by the principles that are enshrined in the African Union Constitutive Act and all the African Union instruments that we are trying to promote. We will never, ever, ever wish to say or to say something that will encourage youth to go against their countries simply because they want to do so. But we will say that raise your issues, identify the challenges, and be there as part of the campaign to change the challenges and the things that you don't agree with. Don't shame and blame and run away. Shame and blame and stand committed to build and to change. Because as youth, you are an agent of change. Let's agree on all of this. Let's agree on this today as Africans, that we are all committed to be there to build this continent from the national level, from the local level. And we are not really trying to say, I'm from this tribe, you are from that tribe, you speak this language, I speak this language. Let's celebrate our diversity. This is what the AGA is all about. This is what the Secretariat is all about. And this is what this conversation today is all about. It's for us to renew that commitment as Africans, so we can really, really leave anything else behind and focus on building our continent, beginning from the local level all the way to the continental level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. That was a really inspiring message as well. I'm sure everyone felt that as well. Let me go straight ahead to David. David, please go ahead. 30 seconds.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and thank you also to Ambassador Salah for the great presentation you've shared. I got two questions, and the first questions go to Ambassador. We have this issue of independence of the electoral system of a country. Taking an example of my country as a Kenyan context, we realize that where there is much of funding, there is much of influence. So if the government is funding the IBC, so they tend to have a manipulative hand. So how do we go about that? Because it is affecting East African countries and at large African countries. Secondly is to Fiona. You've mentioned you have a program on peace campaigns in Kenya, and I would really love to be part of your organization because I work with Catholic Justice and Peace Commission, where our main focus is to see how Christians can take role in a peaceful election and take a bigger position in sanitizing our politics. So that is one thing I can share. So thank you so much.
Fiona, you are muted, Fiona.
Okay, apologies for that. Thank you, David, for your questions. But just to quickly answer what you asked me, ask my colleague Sebastian to send you the relevant contacts so that you can get in touch with the people that are managing our peace campaign. I'm sure they'll be happy to collaborate with you. So Sebastian, please go ahead with that. And let me pass over the mic to Ambassador Sala to respond to your other question.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Thank you, David, for your question. If you go through the provisions and articles of the AGDEC as the instruments that we are using as African Union to promote good governance, democracy, and rule of law on the continent, the AGDEC calls for the for strengthening political pluralism, and also recognize the role of each and every individual in the electoral processes. It also calls for the establishment of ethics for each and every political party in based on or in conformity with the African Union instruments. But also it calls clearly for the establishment of an independent electoral commissions or electoral management bodies that are not serving any political party against the other political party. These are, in theory, they are great principles and great provisions, but the question is about implementation, how each and every member state will go about the implementation of the provisions of all of these instruments. But as Africans, we should not really be, I will say as Africans, I'm coming to the Kenyan level, but as Africans, we should not really be disappointed with the development, the slow development that is currently happening at the continental level. Africa has been under colonial power for a very long time, as you know. The Africa we are now talking about, it's not more than 60 years old. In 60 years, compared to Europe, compared to Latin America, compared to Asia, I think we have done well. And we should be very proud of what we have done so far as Africans within only 60 years. You travel around Africa, you travel around Latin America, you travel around Asia, you will come back and you say, you know what, thank God, we as Africans, we have done very well within the last 60 years. But doing well doesn't mean that we have achieved all the goals and all the objectives that we have set for us as Africans. Now going back to Kenya. Kenya is a very important country within the East African community as well as the continental community as well. Anything happens in Kenya could affect the region, positively or negatively. When Kenya and Kenyans are speaking with one voice, building Kenya, that will have an effect on in the entire region. And you will see clearly affecting the lives of all East African people and also affecting the livelihood of all Africans. That is why when I was speaking recently to the African youth born in Kenya, I was reminding them of three things. Number one, Kenya belongs to all of them. All of them. Number two, we as Africans, as I mentioned earlier, we agree to disagree and disagree to agree. But life goes on. So if you are voting for someone and your candidate is not a winner, you should not be disappointed. Because losing doesn't mean the end of it. Losing means something went wrong that needs to be addressed. So then the future will be for this person and it will be for that political party. But also winning, that doesn't mean that you got it all. Because winning will put you as a candidate and as a political party on the radar screen. And then your acts, your behavior, your leadership will determine whether you will be voted again or not. So in any case, I always say, and this is taking me to the third point, I always say winning or losing is almost the same in a political competition. Because if you lose, you are just in the reserve seat waiting for your turn to come. But if you win, you will go to the field and play And then your playing will determine whether you will be uploaded or not. But after all, what we really need to do is to make sure that the principles of the political system at the national level are upheld by each and every one of us as Kenyans and as Africans. Because if anything goes wrong, then it will be the responsibility of each and every Kenyan. And then the livelihood, the well-being of each and every Kenyan will be affected. And believe me, my brother David, no one can come from heaven to rebuild Kenya for you. Let's see what is happening in Syria. Let's see what is happening in Iraq. Why we go far? Let's see what is happening in Libya. Let's see what is happening in my own country, Sudan, where there is no government for 11 months now. Is this the kind of life that Kenyans wish for? Is this the kind of future that Kenyans wish for? I'm sure not. Please, instead of repeating lessons, let's learn from lessons that we have in front of us. And once again, this political cycle should not divide us as Kenyans, as Africans. It should just be, it should be, as we are really trying to prepare for our future, that we are using this tool to get us there to that future. And as I said, winning and losing at some point are the same. Because if you lose, you will be preparing to win. And if you win, you will need to maintain your victory by doing good for the country. So please, through you, David, my message is to all Kenyan youth. Make sure that Kenya is united, that Kenya is peaceful, that Kenya is indeed peaceful and democratic, simply because if anything goes wrong, then the cost will be greater. And believe me, rebuilding is not going to be an easy mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah, for that powerful message. There are quite a lot of lessons to really hang on to there, not just for Kenya, but for all of us, regardless of where you come from, because elections is a season that comes to all of us. And we all have a responsibility to be part of the change, that good change, the kind of change that says, youth are not here just to cause violence. We're here to impact, we're here to become leaders of value. But let me go straight ahead to Faloye. Please ask your question in the shortest amount of time possible. Faloye? Faloye, are you there? Okay, let me go straight ahead then to Eric. Eric, please go ahead.
So hi everyone, thanks a lot, Fiona. It's an honor to be here, Ambassador Salah Ahmad. I am an aspiring career diplomat from Kenya. So I have a question. My question is, how effective should the role of African youths in democracy and governance absorb cross-sectoral initiatives? Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Let me hand over to Ambassador Salah.
Fiona, I'm really sorry that I couldn't get the question very clearly because I had an echo.
Okay.
Really sorry, Eric, if you don't mind to repeat your question. Sorry, my sincere apologies.
No problem.
Okay,
Eric,
okay.
please repeat.
So my question once again is, how effective should the role of African youths in democracy and governance absorb cross-sectoral initiatives?
Thank you so very much, Eric, for your clear question, and that is really an indicator that you are a promising diplomat for sure. It is important that for the youth to be part of the development of any policy, they have to be part of the decision making and the policy planning from the beginning. They should not just be part of the implementation process. They need to have a space around the table when it comes to the development of each and every policy that we are really talking about today. In addition to that, issues related to youth must be mainstreamed. When government officials, parliamentarians, and others are developing programs and activities in any sector, issues related to youth must be mainstreamed. Why? Because they are the majority. Why? Because they are the most affected, whether the impact is negative or positive. That is why youth initiatives needs to be really mainstreamed. In addition to that, and that will be also an important point that I would like to highlight, that we are not just talking about youth initiatives to be mainstreamed, but in fact, we need to also have youth-led programs developed by youth, as I mentioned earlier. Why? Because that will also make sure that the programs and the initiatives that are created by youth are fit for youth. And then the youth will be also accountable to be part of the implementation process. So once again, youth must be one part of the development process of each and every policy and framework. And youth, of course, as a result, must be also part of the implementation at all levels. I hope I was able to answer your question. Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you
welcome,
so much.
Your Excellency.
All right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah, for that. I'm going to check in once more with Faloye. If you're available to ask your question, now would be your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. Ayo Faloye from Nigeria. I'm a convener of Youth Quake Hub Nigeria, a community group where we are trying to sensitize and advocate for youth inclusion in economic decisions, social decisions, and politics. So very quickly to the charter, to the AGA, I want to ask if there's anything in place in this article that will make countries punishable for not implementing the treaty or charter that they have signed to the latter. For example, in Nigeria, yes, you're correct about lowering of age for young people to be able to participate in politics. But I mean, when it comes to political structure and all other things, they are gagged out based on monetary implications of running for offices and all of other political tactics that are involved. So I want to ask if the charter actually has some disciplinary parts that makes you face those consequences when you decide as a country not to implement to the latter the tenets of the charter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Ambassador Salah.
Thank you so very much, my brother. Each and every instrument of the African Union comes with sanctions against each member state that is not implementing the charter after ratifying it. So there's sanction processes, but also there are many other ways that we could also address issues related to violation of rights against youth and others. Of course, as a civil society organization, you can take your country to the Banjul Commission, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, citing violations of your rights, political rights, economic rights, and social and cultural rights. You can even go further and request the Banjul Commission to take your claim to the African Court on Human and People's Rights in Arusha, so then you can get a binding decision, even if your member state is not adhering to the protocol establishing the African Court. So there are so many issues, but before we even get there, can we ask ourselves ask ourselves about any other possibilities, other venues that we can use as youth before we take our countries to be sanctioned by the Commission or by the court? Can we say or ask questions loudly and say, are we doing enough to approach the politicians in our country, to sensitize them on youth issues, youth campaigns, youth programs and activities? Are we doing well to have the engagement that is needed with our leaders at the national level, with the governors, with the ministers, with the president himself, to make sure that they are really aware of what we are going through as youth at the national level. That kind of communication is important. The communication could be done directly, could be done through social media and other platforms. But really, I personally, I'm not here to advocate for you to take your country to the African Court or to the African Commission. I'm really trying to advocate and lobby for greater engagement between our African youth, our leaders, and our politicians. And I'm saying this because one day, certainly, my brother, you're going to be there, sitting in the same seat that is occupied today by a politician or a leader. And then you will wonder if you would, I will wonder if you would be happy then to be taken to the court or to the commission. I'm very sure that there's an ability within our leaders, our politicians and our parliamentarians, ministers and others to listen to us as youth, especially if our requests are peaceful, respectful, and if our requests are within the principles enshrined in our constitutions at the national level. So allow me today to reiterate my call for our African youth to find ways and means to engage with our politicians on a regular basis. Why? Because opening these venues of communications are important. Not to address one issue that is happening today, but in fact to address issues that might happen in the future. Communication is our, you remember, I'm not sure if you do, maybe you are a lot younger than me, but I remember when I was growing up in a small village somewhere in Sudan. When there's an issue, we will go to the elders under the tree as young men and women and introduce the subject to the elders. We don't debate it. We just tell them what we think and what we are going through as youth. And then they will tell you, you know what, leave us alone and come back at the end of the day. And when you come back at the end of the day, problems are solved. Why? Because they see themselves in us as young men, or they saw themselves in us as young men. And they were asking, if they are not there for us then, are we going to be there for them when they grow older? You can imagine a village that is of, let's say, 100 families, and all the young men and women of the village are no longer there. They left to the capital, they left to Europe, they left to America. So who's going to support these 100 families, I mean elders that are in the village? A simple example. Who's going to be there to bring them the water they need or to fix, this or that for them? You can imagine how difficult life is going to be for them at that age without the support of the young men and women in the village. So therefore, we need to keep Africa as rich as it is through communication channels. Why? Because our aim at the end is to make sure that African youth are staying and not leaving and not running away. African youth today are dying in the Mediterranean Sea. As we speak today, probably there's many of them are dying as we speak today. Many of them already died in the desert, the Sahara, trying to cross to Europe and elsewhere. Many of them died in the Red Sea. Why? Because they felt hopeless. They felt there is no future for them. Why? Because there is no any channels of communications between them and the elders. There is no channel of communication between them and the politicians. So because of that, they lost hope, and they left everything behind so they can look for greener pasture elsewhere. Let's do it differently, my brother. Let's do it differently by opening communication channels. So then we can ensure that our problems are solved and that we are here as African young men and women to build this continent that we want the continent that we deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. Now we are quite pressed for time, so I'm going to allow one more question, and then perhaps the other two hands I see up, maybe if you could type, just a brief version of your question in the comment section, we can see how to get to it. But let me, so I see someone called Lai Vivofana. Go ahead, sir.
All right, thank you very much. I am Lai Fifofana from Liberia, but I currently study in Kigali, Rwanda. All right, I want to know, my first question is I want to know, how can you calm down disenchanted youth for not going into violence or causing chaos in keeping the peace of your country or that country if the government has failed the country? That's the first question I want to know. And the second question is, I also want to know, how can you peacefully practice your democratic rights as a student body to ensure that the governments do the right thing? Because there is a problem currently in Liberia where the youth are gathering together, ensuring or telling their governments to fix the country and other stuff. But because of that, they are involved into violence and other stuff. So I want to know, how can you calm down disenchanted youth because of that? And also, how can you practice your democratic right peacefully?
Okay, thank you. Let me hand over to Ambassador Salah.
My brother Lai, thank you so much for your two questions. For the first one, which is linked to the second one, the African Youth Charter, the AGDEC, the African Charter of Democracy, Elections and Governance, and even the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and let me say all the African Union shared values and instruments. They really call for free and fair elections when it comes to the election of governments, but also they call for freedom of expression, freedom of association. These are principles, these are global human rights that are not debated. So as youth, as a student, you are entitled for your voice to be heard. Facilities, mechanisms, platforms must be in place to allow our African youth, our African students, voices to be heard through the parliament, through the political parties, through the executive, and even through the presidency. All of these rights are enshrined in our African Union or our African shared values and instruments. But then another question will be, if protests, destruction will really help in advancing the cause. Because when you go on the street and you destroy public property, public properties belongs to you and me. We as Africans, taxpayers, we are paying for what you are destroying. So this is the way that we can make our voices heard. Peaceful demonstrations are allowed and must be allowed because of the African shared values and instruments. But again, as I mentioned before, and let me repeat it again, that we as Africans and African youth, African students included, we need to be creative in advancing our grievances, in promoting or in introducing our challenges or our issues. We need, as I mentioned, to make sure that the channels of communications open through various platforms. This is not for you only. This is for you, for me, and for the generations to come. Because if we every day need something to be changed, we go on the street and destroy the public properties we have, burn the ambulances that we have, then you can imagine the cost. You can imagine the cost. That is why we need to be creative. our voices must be heard, especially if there's an issue that to be addressed. And if it cannot be addressed at the national level, bring it to the continental level. If it is an issue related to human rights, we have the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, based in Banjul, Gambia. We have the African Court on Human and People's Rights, based in Arusha, Tanzania. If it is an issue related to corruption, we have the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption, based in Arusha. If it is an issue related to governance, we have the African Peer Review Mechanism, APRM. We have the African Commission. We have the African Governance Platform. If it is an issue related to the violation of the rights of the child, we have the African Committee of Experts on the Right and Welfare of the Child. So there are so many mechanisms. And last but not least, we have the African Parliament, the Pan-African Parliament, based in South Africa, Midrand. So many mechanisms there that could assist you with your challenges, with your grievances, with the violations that you are facing. But let's not to resort to destruction of properties or to, becoming a reason for a civil war or conflicts at the national level, because the cost is very high. We have seen it in your own country. We have seen it in Sierra Leone, in Liberia. We have seen it in South Sudan, in DRC, in CAR, Central African Republic, in Mali, and elsewhere. We need to leave that chapter behind and look forward to a better future. And the only way for a better future is to ensure youth engagement through better means and ways of communication. That way, we will be able to address our problems, our issues, and move ahead and move forward to build our countries. So then we can contribute to building the continent that we want. Africa that we all love. Africa where we all belong. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah. I do see a couple of more hands up. However, Ambassador Salah has been kind enough to share his email address and also encouraged you to feel free to reach out via that email address. We have shared it in the comment section, and I'll ask my colleague Mafunda to go ahead and share it again. So please feel free to reach out to him. As you can see, he's very generous with his time, and I don't want us to take too much advantage. I know we've really pushed quite ahead of the time that we had planned, but thank you everybody for giving us this time. But a very sincere thank you to you, Ambassador Salah, for making the time to speak to us. And perhaps now we can just give you a moment to give us a parting shot before we close this discussion.
Fiona, thank you so very much. And let me begin by thanking you for your wise moderation. You have done an excellent job. Congratulations, really. I'm always quite happy, delighted and honored when I see a young woman like you in that leadership seat, moderating our conversation in a very excellent manner. And that always reminds me of how wiser women in Africa are and how they deserve to be part of the leadership, because Africa cannot fly with one wing. We need to make sure that our African women are empowered and engaged in our African governance affairs. So I really see you not as a future leader, but I see you as a leader of today as well as the leader of the future. Thank you very much and congratulations once again. Let me also, through you, quickly thank You Lead Africa for the opportunity. And I'm really happy to be part of this engagement today. This is an excellent engagement simply because we all gathered around this table today simply because of one issue or one goal. That goal is to find ways and means to promote good governance, democracy, rule of law on our continent. As Africans, we must explore African solutions for our African problems. I think we are tired of having others intervening in our affairs. And that is why it is now an obligation, I would say obligation for our African youth to train themselves, to capacitate themselves, so they could be part of the process to address our challenges and to promote our good governance, democracy, and rule of law at the national level, regional level, and continental level. The future is here. Certainly the future is here. Why? Because Africa has it all. We have the good weather, we have the fertile land, we have the water, the natural resources. Above all, we have the African youth. The only thing that we lack, or let me say, we have challenges with, is that leadership and management that is necessary, that is needed to allow the African youth and the Africans to build the continent they want and the continent we deserve. This conversation is part of that campaign. It's part of the efforts to build the Africa we want and the Africa we deserve. My message to all youth around the table today, please don't lose hope. The future is here, but we cannot enjoy the future, or at least prepare it for our children, unless we sacrifice some of our own personal things, personal issues, I would say. And let's try to believe sincerely that our unity is in our diversity. Africa is very diverse for one reason only. So then Africa will become united, will become strong, prosperous, and peaceful. Let's respect and tolerate this diversity that we have, and let's enjoy it. And as youth, we must always not lose hope. If you fail today, stand up and try again tomorrow. If you fail again tomorrow, stand up and try after tomorrow. And you fail again and again and again. And every time you fail, it's an opportunity for you to learn something new. It's an opportunity for you to equip yourself with a new skill, with a new knowledge, with a new information. It's an opportunity for you to prepare yourself to become part of this campaign, to build the Africa that we want and the Africa that we deserve, the Africa that we love, the Africa that is our home. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah, for that strong closing. I think the overlapping theme has really been unity. There is only so much we can achieve as communities, as countries, as a continent, without being unified and truly involved, truly participating. Whichever 1% you're doing is so vital to the continent, even outside of governance, which is what we are discussing today. So thank you once again, Ambassador Salah, for taking the time. We really appreciate this kind of leadership where you are actually of service and making time for young people. It's very, very important. And once again, we appreciate it. Thank you so much to each and every one of you who have made time to come and spend this time with us, to learn and to share with us also, so we can hear from you. We're going to close this session on that note. And once again, if you really would like to speak to Ambassador Salah, he has been kind enough to share his email address in the comment section. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer some of your questions and connect with you. So thank you once again, and a very, depending on where you are, good evening, good afternoon, good night, and I hope we'll see you next week. Have a good one, and that's it from us at You Lead Africa. Thank you, and God bless.
Ivan, as the head of the Leadership and Governance Academy at TCBC, and as the ULI Program Director, you are also offering leadership for this Youth Governance Architecture study. We'd like to find out from you why this study is important, not just for TCBC, but for the region.
First of all, the study addresses the evidence gap that exists on youth programming. There is a lot that many players are trying to do for the young people and with the young people, but we need to update the status of affairs of the young people. What do the young people want to see more in their space, and what areas do they need support more? And so this research is an effort to collect data, evidence, to inform what the young people really aspire for, and for players like government, civil society, and development partners to program on the basis of such evidence in order to be responsive to the current needs of the young people in the region.
I believe that we are still trapped into a narrative seeing young people as this homogeneous group, without realizing that there is a massive difference of circumstances from 18 to 35, and then all these socioeconomic circumstances. But then when we take a step back and think of young women, we know that patriarchy negatively affects their participation at private and public life. As such, when we want to investigate to which extent the environment is enabling youth participation, we need also to focus specifically on young women participation. Young women participation is this big, different group. Let's take, for example, young women with disabilities. Which type and form of disabilities? What type of socio-economic challenges and circumstances affect them? What's their level of education? And many other aspects from rural to urban, and also the way the digital divide affects them. Starting from this kind of analysis, we have then realized that it was extremely important not just to investigate youth participation, but even more, young women participation from an inclusive perspective, which means that we have focused as well on young people with disabilities.
The research addresses the programming needs of a cluster and set of players. To begin with, the youth themselves. They need a space and a process through which they can express their own needs, aspirations, and what they want to see working on, and whoever wants to support them, where they should put the support. 2, government policymakers at all levels, from national youth councils to members of parliament that represent young people, but also policymakers in the institutions of government, such as national youth councils and ministries responsible for taking care of the needs of the young people. And lastly, the development partners who are supporting government efforts and also in some way supporting young people's efforts. They need to know through this research for the next 3, 4 years, 5 years, what should we prioritize in order to be in solidarity with the young people and address their identified needs.
Conducting such a study, which basis is indeed inclusivity, was not easy, because inevitably we know that the 6 countries of our consideration, but more generally the continent, is affected by an evident digital divide, which means that conducting and trying an outreach to the most vulnerable was not easy. We tried with the expedient of having a cross-sectoral investigation through focus group in each country of our interest. And although it was very interesting of having the engagement with different stakeholders, yet it was a little bit challenging in terms of investigating, collaborating, exchanging with, for example, young people with disabilities, but also different young women groups.
So with the existing frameworks for youth participation in leadership and contribution to the governance of this continent, what is this unique thing we should be looking forward to from this study?
The frameworks are in place, guiding what young people are, who they are, what their needs are, and what governments and other players could do to address these needs. But the frameworks lack a life. Therefore, this study goes a step further. It studies the voices, the needs, and the practice on how young people are being engaged, and addresses the gap of the distance between the frameworks and the needs of young people. If you like, this study moves the frameworks from policies to results, and this is the addition or the value add that the study brings to the very many wonderful frameworks that already exist at national level, regional level, and continental level.